What troubles you the most? Like, what keeps you up at night the most? When a student comes up to the microphone and says, I want to ask about this, and you go, oh boy, all right, here we go. I don't know about this. You know.
For me, it's some of the issues you've already raised. Slavery and some of the wars in the Old Testament. Those are very difficult issues for me. I don't understand them. Secondly, the problem of suffering. When I sit with parents who've lost a child due to a horrible car accident, why didn't God allow the babysitters to see the stop sign? Why did they go right through the stop sign and then hit by a pickup truck coming down at 55 miles an hour? So the problem of suffering, why does God intervene in certain situations and not in others? That's a very difficult issue. So there are a number of very difficult issues for me. And I am convinced to the root of my being that Jesus Christ is the truth, but I can't prove that. I struggle with doubt. I struggle with uncertainty. So I don't mean to communicate to you, Alex, that I've got it all nailed down, because I don't. There's tremendous uncertainty. There's tremendous doubt that I experience on a regular basis. But the overwhelming evidence in my experience of life, in what Christ has done in my life. When I was 10 years old, I was separated from my family and really got lonely in upstate New York. And for the first time in my life, I cried out from the depth of my being, Jesus, if you're really there, I want to know you, because I'm lonely right now and I hate it. And Christ gave me an overwhelming sense of his presence, his witness with me. So in spite of the doubts, in spite of the uncertainties, the reality of Christ in my life, as I observe others, as I experience life, convinces me that he is by far the best option. Let me give you one closing illustration. I was doing open air Columbia, and a professor invited me to come into his class. He was a postdoc student from UK, and the class was a discussion on the difference between Zwingli and Calvin's view of war. And the guy was brilliant, and the discussion was off the charts amazing. So I'm walking out of the classroom with the guy, and I turned to him and say, Professor, that was amazing. Thank you so much. Now let me ask you, what are you living for? And what's the evidence that whatever it is you're living for is true? And this brilliant postdoc student from UK looks me in the face and says, I'm not a good person to ask that question of. That's scary. And yet it's been my experience too often that too many people have to answer the same way. Don't ask me that question. What am I living for, and what's the evidence that what I am living for is true? Because they have not thought through, what am I really living for? What motivates me? Why do I get up in the morning? Why do I do what I do? Why do I work the way I work? Why do I treat people the way I treat people? What's going to happen after death? They just haven't thought about it, and yet they're living for something. And the question is, what's the evidence that what you are living for is true? So in spite of my uncertainty, in spite of the fact I can't prove God exists or prove that Christ rose from the dead, the evidence is God does exist, the evidence is he really does love me, and the evidence is the resurrection took place. And therefore, I will follow the evidence to Christ. Not that it's perfect, it's not. Not that there are not problems in the Bible, there are. But gosh, when you look at the way he loves you and me, when you look at the experiences of life that you get and the experiences of others, it's real clear to me. Trust in him.
Stuart?
My biggest one really hasn't changed since I was 5 years old, which is my closest friend is somebody I can't connect with the five senses, especially I can't see. And my biggest piece of grief and sadness for people who don't believe in God gets back to one thing you said in the beginning. They lack objective meaning and purpose in their life. And I always thought that was kind of something like a God argument. I thought that was kind of theoretical. But now I'm getting in the trenches with so many university students at Yale and UConn this week, and it's in living color. And one of my best friends recently broke down, who's an atheist, and he said, I'm so jealous and envious that you have objective meaning and purpose in life. I can't find mine, and it's falling apart. And he's this incredible athlete, brilliant. He has the world at his fingertips, money, everything. And yet he's breaking down, crying. And then I have another woman who's one of the best artists probably on the East Coast, and she's in the psych unit because she tried to find her meaning and purpose in her art. And so for my biggest heartache for those who don't believe in God is, where are you going to find your objective meaning and purpose? And it goes right back to Infinite Jest. I started David Foster Wallace. It's probably the best. He was going to be the best writer of our generation. Strong atheist. But he said, be careful. If there is no God, if there is nothing infinite, you're going to worship something here on this planet, and it's going to eat you alive, and you'll have no meaning and purpose. And throughout my training and master's in psychology, I loved Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and how, even as a secular Jew, he really teased this out with being in the prisoner of war camps. Those who believed in God, or at least that they would see a loved one again one day outside of Auschwitz and others, they were the ones who weren't nasty, brutish. They were the ones who didn't just die in the war camp, but they actually still had hope. And so I just see all this. I wrestle with it, but I kind of, like my dad said, a lot of people say, oh, just the cumulative case for Christianity. And that's why I believe in God. So like the moral argument, teleological, and these, look, I'm good with that. But that's still the intellectual, rational side. I would say it's the cumulative case in the sense of intellectual, rational, emotional, and cultural. And does the Christian worldview play out in all these areas? Or does the secular worldview make more sense and stack up in a cumulative way that's more satisfying? So far, I'll end with the strong agnostic over in the UK who wrote the book, The Things That Are Amiss, The Things That Are Missing, I think was the title, Hauerwas. And he talked about how, as an agnostic, there are so many things missing in the secular worldview that can't be accounted for. And you can't see these things, touch these things. But as a materialist, so many materialists are searching for these meaning and consciousness and understanding what love is. But there's no love if you're a materialist. And he said that's why the Christian worldview makes the most sense. And these are not theoretical things. I see them played out in the counseling office. I see them played out on the university campus, in the church, one-on-one conversations. And so there's a God-shaped hole, and we've got to find a way to fill it. And I think any and everything will rattle around in that God-shaped hole other than God himself.